You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
It started with a gentle tapping at the window, a sound no grieving parent could resist. When Jack, a rural firefighter haunted by loss, begins seeing his recently buried daughter Lily outside his home, he's certain grief is driving him mad. But as neighbors confess to seeing her too, Jack must confront a horrifying possibility. What if Lily isn't just a ghostly vision? What if she's something worse, something desperate to get inside? In this chilling, true-feeling tale from Soul Studios, discover what happens when love, folklore, and terror collide. Join us as we unravel this unforgettable account of heartbreak, darkness, and one crucial rule that should never be broken. Subscribe to Soul Studios for more immersive horror stories where reality and nightmares blur. And remember, some doors should never be opened. I jolted awake to a soft on my bedroom window. My heart hammered in my chest as I squinted through the darkness. There it was again. That gentle tapping, like tiny knuckles against the pane. For a moment, I wondered if I was still dreaming. But as the wind outside died down, I heard it clearly. I reached over and clicked on the bedside lamp. Pale yellow light flooded my small bedroom, chasing away some of the shadows. With a deep breath, I slid out of bed and approached the window, each step slow and hesitant. On the other side of the glass, a figure stood in the pale glow of the porch light. My breath caught in my throat. It was a little girl, hair tangled, skin ashen, wearing a dirt-stained white nightgown. She lifted a mud-caked hand and tapped again lightly on the window. It couldn't be. I felt the blood drain from my face as I recognized the girl's delicate features. The button nose, the dimple on her left cheek. It was my daughter, my Lily. But Lily was dead. We had buried her 3 days ago. I froze, my mind rejecting what I saw. On the other side of the thin glass, Lily, or something that looked like Lily, stared back at me with wide, glassy eyes. Dirt streaked her blonde hair and smudged her once rosy face. Her lips moved silently, forming a single word I couldn't hear. She pressed her small hand flat against the window. I could see dirt under her fingernails. My stomach lurched. When I didn't move, she spoke again, slightly louder, her tone desperate and cracking. "Daddy, I'm cold. Let me in." A chill rippled down my spine. That voice was Lily's, soft and sweet, with a pleading tremor that hit me straight in the heart. My hands trembled on the windowsill. I stepped back, shaking my head in disbelief. "No," I whispered, throat tight. "You're not real. You can't be." Lily's pale lips quivered. She mouthed please again, and this time I heard her through the glass. "Daddy, please, let me in." Tears burned in my eyes as I stood there, paralyzed between terror and longing. Part of me wanted to fling open that window and scoop my little girl into my arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But some deep, primal fear rooted me to the floor. This couldn't be real. This thing at the window, begging to come inside, it couldn't be my Lily. Outside, Lily's small hand curled into a fist and began to thump against the glass. Not hard, she was too little to break it, but insistently. Each dull thud sent a jolt through my body. I clapped my hands over my ears. "This isn't real. This isn't real," I whimpered to myself, squeezing my eyes shut. Hot tears were streaming down my face. On the other side of the wall, the gentle thumping and scratching continued for what felt like forever. Eventually, the tapping and scraping stopped. When I finally dared to peek, pulling the curtain aside just a sliver, the pale face was gone. Lily, or the thing that wore her face, had vanished into the night. Only a faint smudge remained on the glass where her hand had been. Daylight held only the cruel reality of Lily's funeral. Under a merciless July sun, a small crowd of neighbours and friends from the firehouse watched as I lowered my little girl's coffin into the ground. That evening, alone in the silent house, I clutched her favourite stuffed bunny and whispered a prayer for any sign that she was at peace. When I finally collapsed into bed after midnight, I never imagined anything could wake me. The next morning I jolted awake on the bedroom floor, still in yesterday's clothes. My back ached from sleeping hunched against the wall. For a fleeting moment I thought it really had been just a nightmare, a ghastly hallucination born of grief. I stumbled to the window and yanked open the curtains, heart pounding. Early sunlight spilled into the room, revealing the backyard glistening with dew. Everything seemed normal in the morning light. No footprints in the grass, no handprints on the glass. Nothing to prove the previous night had been real. Had I simply lost my mind from sorrow and lack of sleep? I pressed my palm against the cold window where Lily's hand had been. There was no trace of her. I nearly convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. After all, grief does terrible things to the mind. That day I told no one about what I'd seen. I wandered the house in a daze, avoiding Lily's bedroom and jumping at every creak. Every so often I caught myself listening for her giggle or the patter of her little feet, as I used to when she was alive. Each time, the crushing truth hit me again. Lily was gone. Or at least, she was supposed to be. By nightfall, exhaustion and dread had settled deep in my bones. I checked every door and window lock twice as dusk fell, telling myself over and over that last night's horror would not repeat. Eventually, I must have drifted into a fitful doze on the living room couch. A little after midnight, I awoke with a start to at the front door. The room was completely dark aside from the weak blue glow of the TV static. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 1:13 a.m. My pulse skyrocketed. No one in Briarglen would knock at this hour unless something was very wrong. I stood, every muscle tensed, and crept to the door. Through the peephole I could see nothing but the dim shape of my porch and the swaying silhouette of the oak tree in the yard. Whoever had knocked was standing just out of view. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry as sand. "Hello?" I called, voice barely above a whisper. For a moment only the crickets answered. I exhaled, wondering if I'd imagined the knocking too, or if maybe some prankster kids. "Daddy, can I come in? Please?" I staggered back against the wall as that tiny voice floated through the door, muffled but unmistakable. Lily. It was Lily's voice, pleading and confused. My hand found the deadbolt. I pressed my palm against the door, as if I could somehow feel her presence through the wood. My little girl was right outside, calling for me. How could this be happening? You're not real, I stammered, tears in my eyes. Lily's gone. This isn't real. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping to wake up from this living nightmare. A soft sniffle came from the other side. She sounded hurt. Then, in a trembling whisper, "Why won't you let me in, Daddy? I'm so cold." I choked back a sob of my own. It was torture. My every instinct as a father screamed to open that door and comfort my child. But fear held me in place. My mind raced. If this really was Lily, why was she here? How? And if it wasn't, what on earth was I talking to? My resolve faltered. Before I knew it, my hand was turning the lock. The deadbolt gave a loud click in the silence. I began to twist the knob. No, stop. Some last shred of caution flared up. I left the security chain latched and eased the door open just a crack. Cool night air hissed in. Through the 2-inch gap, I saw a small figure standing on my moonlit porch. She was barefoot, wearing the same white nightdress we'd buried her in, now stained with earth. Her eyes were wide and milky pale, not the bright blue I remembered. Dirt clung to her tangled hair and greyish skin. She looked up at me through the gap with an expression of pure hurt and longing. "Sweetheart?" I croaked. A fetid odour wafted in through the opening, damp soil and rot. I gagged, recoiling instinctively, but I didn't shut the door. Not yet. Lily's little hand reached through the gap, palm upturned as if asking me to take it. "Please, Daddy," she whimpered. "I want to come home." Her voice hitched on a sob. A groan of anguish escaped my throat. My heart was breaking and racing at the same time. "Baby, I'm sorry," I babbled. "I'm so sorry." She pressed against the door and the chain strained. I saw her small arm, smeared with mud, reaching as far as it could. Her fingernails grazed my forearm, leaving burning scratches. I yelped and instinctively slammed the door shut against her push. The chain lock held, the door thumped back into its frame. Lily outside let out a choked wail, a sound of pain and betrayal no parent ever wants to hear. Through the crack, I caught one glimpse of her eye pressed to the opening. Only the bloodshot white was visible, rolled upward. "Why, Daddy?" She warbled in a warbling, almost inhuman tone. "Don't you love me anymore?" "I do," I cried, voice breaking. I fumbled the chain off and flung the door wide in a sudden flood of grief and guilt. But Lily was already gone, fleeing down the porch steps in a jerky, loping run. I caught a final sight of her white dress as she disappeared among the trees at the end of our yard. I collapsed to my knees in the doorway, sobbing openly as the night breeze swept over me. My trembling hands stung with the fresh scratches she'd given me. In the porch light, I could see 3 red lines on my forearm, beads of blood welling up. They burned hot, real and undeniable. That was the second night. This was no hallucination. I had spoken to my dead daughter, touched her, and those scratches were painful proof. I barely slept for the remainder of the night. When the sun finally rose, I bandaged the wounds on my arm and stared out the kitchen window in a daze. The world outside looked so normal. Neighbours walking dogs, the mailman making his rounds, and I wondered if I was utterly alone in this nightmare. Was I the only one seeing the impossible? All day my thoughts churned with one question: had Lily truly risen from her grave? Those red scratches on my arm were proof enough that whatever I'd seen was real. One rumour even reached me, that a child had been seen wandering near the cemetery at dawn. By evening, I had to know the truth. Armed with a flashlight, a crowbar, and a shovel, I drove to St. Mary's Cemetery under the first stars of night. I parked along a back dirt road and climbed over the low stone wall into the graveyard. The summer night was oppressively quiet. Even the crickets hushed as I crept among the headstones. My breath caught when I reached Lily's grave. In the glow of my flashlight, the fresh mound of earth looked disturbed. By Lily's headstone, the loose soil was sunken and torn. Half buried in the dirt was a shred of her white burial dress. My blood ran cold. My little girl had crawled out of her own grave. A scraping sound behind me snapped me out of my shock. I twisted around, shining my flashlight toward the noise. The beam sliced through the dark, illuminating a stand of gnarled yew trees at the cemetery's edge. Their branches swayed, but there was no wind. I held my breath. The night was dead still now. Even the frogs and insects had gone silent. I felt an overpowering sensation that I was not alone out here. I took a cautious step back from Lily's gaping grave. My pulse thudded in my ears. Maybe coming here alone had been a terrible mistake. Another rustle, off to my left. A twig snapped under a soft footstep. My flashlight darted toward the sound, but I saw only leaning headstones and shadows. They were all around me. I could sense it. Hidden figures in the darkness circling slowly. My heart leapt into my throat. I turned and ran. The beam of my flashlight bobbed wildly as I sprinted between tombstones. In my peripheral vision, shapes flitted behind monuments and between trees. A low moan rose from the dark, answered by another to my right. I gasped in terror, vaulting over a half-sunken grave marker. My shoe caught on its edge and I stumbled, nearly dropping my flashlight. The light swung crazily and for a split second illuminated a gaunt figure just ahead of me. It lurched forward out of the shadows with a wet, gurgling hiss. I caught a glimpse of hollow eyes and sagging grey flesh, the corpse of old Mr. Duncan, a neighbour I'd helped bury last spring. A strangled scream tore from my throat. I veered sideways, narrowly dodging the bony hands grasping for me, and kept running. Behind me, I heard a tiny echoing voice carry on the air. "Daddy?" Lily. Whether it was truly her or some fiend mimicking her, I didn't dare look back. I flew over the stone wall and raced to my car, lungs burning. I dove inside, slamming the door just as something pale and smudged with dirt emerged from the cemetery tree line. My shaking hands jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life and I peeled away down the rutted lane. ground splitting and headlights cutting through the dark. In the rearview mirror, I briefly saw multiple figures standing at the edge of the cemetery, watching me go. Among them was a small child-sized shape in a white dress. I bit back a sob and pressed the accelerator to the floor. I didn't breathe until I was back home, doors locked and bolted behind me. It was nearly midnight again. I sank to the floor of my entryway, every part of me shaking. Mud and cold sweat smeared my clothes. Across the room, the framed photo of Lily on the mantel smiled out at me, her gap-toothed grin and bright eyes from a happier time. Why is this happening? I whispered to that empty house. No answer came, of course. Only silence, for now. I realized one thing with cold clarity. Through it all, they had never breached my home. Lily and the others had come right up to the threshold, but they hadn't gotten in. Not until someone let them. My home was still mine, protected somehow by simple four walls and a locked door. But I knew with dawning dread that they would be back. Lily had come to me first, perhaps using the love in my heart as bait to invite her in. And I had almost done it. I had almost opened the door fully and given her entry. Would she have killed me if I had? Turned me into one of those shambling dead things? I didn't know, and I desperately didn't want to find out. Whatever the reason, I still had one slim advantage. So long as I kept my doors shut, I was safe. For now. Determined to survive the coming night, I set about fortifying my home. I barricaded the front door with a heavy bookshelf and wedged chairs under the knobs of the back door and windows. I retrieved my old hunting rifle from the closet and double-checked that it was loaded. I wasn't even sure if bullets could stop whatever those things were, but I felt better having it. I also grabbed a wooden baseball bat and kept it within arm's reach. I turned off every light in the house, leaving only a small lamp aglow in the living room. Then I settled into an armchair facing the front door, rifle across my lap. The house was silent. My heartbeat was not. It thudded in my throat as the minutes crept past. Midnight came and went. Any moment now. A floorboard on the porch groaned. I sat bolt upright, tightening my grip on the rifle. Another creak closer to the door. A shadow shifted beyond the frosted window pane. Someone was right outside. The doorknob rattled lightly. A childish giggle drifted through the door, an eerie echo of happier times. I raised the rifle, barrel aimed dead center at the door. My finger hovered over the trigger. Knuckles tapped, ever so gently on the wood. A familiar little voice followed. "Daddy, I know you're in there." Lily's voice was sing-song, almost teasing. "I came back, Daddy. I came back for you." A cold sweat broke out on my skin. She sounded different, less plaintive, more playful, but in a mocking, dead way. I clenched my jaw, staying silent. "Daddy," she cooed again from the other side, knocking a bit harder this time. "It's so cold out here. Mommy said you'd let me in." My breath caught. Lily's mother had been gone for years. She left us when Lily was a toddler and never returned. Whatever is out there, it's digging through my memories, I realized, finding any way to break me down. A slow scraping started along the door, as if fingernails were dragging down. "Daddy, open up," Lily's voice crooned, lilting and unnatural. "Open the door. Open the door. Open the door," she chanted softly. The doorknob began to rattle frantically, and the door shook against the barricade I'd made. I held my breath, heart hammering. She shouldn't be able to get in, not unless I let her, right? Suddenly, Lily's voice snapped from a sing-song to a furious shriek. "Let me in!" The command rippled with a guttural distortion that made my blood run cold. I flinched, finger tightening on the trigger. Almost immediately, the shriek dissolved into sobs. Hideous, broken sobbing that didn't quite sound like a child or a human at all. There was a heavy thud against the door, then another. It sounded like she was battering her small fists or head against it in frustration. Each muffled wham made the door tremble and made my resolve waver just a bit more. Outside, fists pounded on the windows, nails scraped at the siding, testing every entry point with increasing desperation. They were no longer trying to hide their presence. Lily and whoever, or whatever was with her, wanted in. I stood in the center of the living room, turning in agonized circles as each new sound hit me. The rifle in my hands felt like a pathetic toy against an onslaught of undead loved ones. This was psychological torture as much as physical. At some point I realized I was screaming, shouting over the cacophony, telling them to shut up, to go away, punctuating my pleas with wild sobs. My words did nothing. The pounding grew louder, the scratching more fervent. It was a siege of my home and of my sanity. Among the din, Lily's voice suddenly rose above the rest, wailing with a heart-rending despair. "Daddy, I'm begging you. I need you. Why won't you help me? Don't you love me anymore?" That last plea, delivered in her tiny broken voice, shattered me completely. A strangled cry tore from my throat. I couldn't take it. My mind, my heart, everything was being pulled apart. Okay, I sobbed. I lunged toward the front door, fumbling at the heavy bookshelf I'd braced against it. My fingers, slick with sweat, tore at the furniture until it toppled aside. I unlatched the chain, unlocked the deadbolt, and with a hysterical scream, I flung the door open. Night air and moonlight swirled into my living room as the door swung wide. There stood Lily on the threshold, pale and dirty and smiling. Not an innocent smile, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched her cheeks. Her eyes, filmed over in milky white, flashed with a hunger that froze me in place. Behind her, just beyond the porch steps, clustered a half-dozen shadowy figures. I smelled damp rot and realized my yard was swarming with the dead. Mr. Duncan was among them, head lolling. A young man missing half his jaw crouched beside the rose bushes. An elderly woman in a tattered burial gown stood at the foot of the steps, staring blankly. All of them waiting for me to invite them in. Lily's small hand found mine, her icy fingers intertwined with my own. I sank to my knees in the doorway, overcome by a tidal wave of emotion. I actually smiled through my tears as I cupped her cold, dirty cheek in my palm. For one insane, blissful second, I convinced myself my daughter had really come home. "Lily," I whispered, voice shaking with love and terror. "You're home, baby." She giggled, an oddly hollow sound, and threw her grimy arms around my neck. I hugged her tightly, sobbing into her matted hair. She smelled of damp earth and something coppery sweet. I tried to ignore it. My baby girl was in my arms again. "It's okay," I choked out. "Daddy's here now. Daddy's got you." Her body stiffened in my embrace. The giggle from her throat turned into a clicking, feral purr. Before I could react, her little arms tightened around me with impossible strength. I heard ribs in my chest crack like dry sticks. "Ah, Lily!" I gasped in pain. I struggled to pull back, but her fingers dug into my shoulders like claws, holding me in an iron grip. She drew her face back from my neck, and I saw those milky eyes up close, empty of any warmth or recognition. Her lips peeled away from blackened teeth in a snarl. A stringy hiss gurgled from her throat. This wasn't my daughter. Not anymore. Too late, I understood the truth. I had let them in. Behind Lily, multiple shapes began shuffling up the porch steps. Now that the barrier of the door was broken, they moved eagerly, moaning in anticipation. I saw Mr. Duncan's corpse dragging itself forward on broken limbs, and the young man with no jaw skittering on all fours like a spider. They poured into my home, a flood of rot and hunger. Panic finally overwhelmed my shock. A survival instinct kicked in. I ripped one arm free from Lily's crushing embrace and reached for the rifle on the floor beside me. Her eyes followed the motion. With an animalistic snarl, she lunged. Searing pain exploded in my shoulder as her teeth sank into me. I screamed and swung the rifle upward with all my strength. The wooden stock cracked against the side of her skull. There was a sickening crunch, and Lily, or the thing wearing Lily's body, recoiled with a shrill shriek. I staggered to my feet, adrenaline surging over agony. Lily's small form crumpled backward onto the porch, momentarily dazed from the blow. The other dead swarmed past her, clawing and grabbing at me as they flooded over the threshold. Skeletal hands tore at my clothes. Mr. Duncan's corpse latched onto my arm. Another creature seized a fistful of my hair. I fired the rifle blindly into the mass. The gun's roar was deafening in the tight space. One of the ghouls, a young man, jerked backward as his shoulder exploded in a spray of dark blood, but he didn't fall. None of them even screamed. They just kept coming, unfazed. Within seconds, cold, rotting bodies bore me to the floor. I went down hard, face up, the air knocked from my lungs. Dead weight piled on me. I tried to scream, but a bony hand clamped over my mouth. Teeth sank into my leg, tearing flesh. Another set of jaws bit deep into my forearm, ripping skin and muscle. White-hot pain blinded me. I thrashed and kicked, but it was useless. Above me, I saw Lily standing again, her head cocked at an unnatural angle where I'd struck her. Black ichor oozed from a fracture in her skull, yet she stepped toward me, eerily unbothered. I felt her cold little fingers brush my cheek. Through my fading vision, I saw her smile down at me one last time. "Daddy," she whispered almost gently. Then she opened her mouth impossibly wide and plunged towards my throat. I heard and felt the crunch as everything went red. My own gurgling scream mingled with the chorus of undead snarls as they all fell upon me at once. Then, darkness. They say when the demons of grief come knocking, you must never answer. I learned that lesson too late, and now I'm paying the ultimate price. So if you ever hear a beloved voice at your door in the dead of night, don't let them in. Some doors should never be opened. When the dead knock, never answer.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.